You are not here by accident. We are standing at the edge of possibilities between what is, what could, and what will be. Where time, space, and humanity cross paths. Where the future has stopped being theory as old assumptions fade away and new realities are becoming real. Are you ready to step beyond the familiar? Look no further and enter the third horizon.
Before we begin, it is important to set the frame for this conversation. This episode is not about intelligence versus ignorance. It is not about blaming leaders, institutions, or individuals. And it is not about second-guessing decisions after the fact. It is about understanding the conditions under which decisions are made. Throughout history, some of the most consequential choices were made by highly capable, well-informed people, often under intense pressure, limited time, and profound uncertainty. This conversation is about what happens to judgment in those moments. It is about the difference between knowing more and choosing wisely, between speed and discernment, between confidence and restraint. The goal here is not criticism, it is clarity. Because as our systems grow more powerful, the cost of poor judgment grows with them. With that in mind, let us begin. Today, I want to welcome our guest speaker, Lembit Opik. Lembit Opik is well-versed in politics and has actually been in public service. Has a lot of experience in that area. So he brings a wealth of knowledge with him today into today's podcast. Lembit Opik, welcome to the show.
It's great to see you, John, and thanks very much for giving me the honor of being on your podcast.
Thank you. Across history, humanity has never lacked intelligence. We have built vast cities, mapped the stars, split the atom, sent machines beyond our solar system. And yet, again and again, intelligent people and advanced societies make decisions that later appear deeply unwise. Lembit, we're going to stop there. Can you think of any instances in history that would fall into this category?
Obviously, in the 1930s, Japan, a well-educated, intelligent country, decided to try to create an empire beyond Japan. And it invaded China. It had ambitions of occupying Australia, though how anyone can really occupy Australia when the overwhelming majority of square kilometers isn't even inhabited is beyond me. Why did they do that? They did that because they had a social and economic problem they couldn't fix. So they externalized it. They thought that by conquering other countries, they could fix their own problems. Of course, as we know, this resulted in the bombing of two cities in Japan, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, with atomic bombs. And it was interesting to note that probably the biggest death toll was in the capital itself as a result of firebombing. So there's one example. Another example would be the situation that we saw in Germany in the 1930s, terrible economic crisis there. Adolf Hitler offered solutions and actually did quite well economically for a long time, but was dragged down by what you might call his, I'm not being euphemistic now, his social policies. So you can see where intelligent nations, countries like Japan and Germany, which weren't very different in terms of their intelligentsia to the United Kingdom, ended up in a mess and essentially destroying themselves as a result.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's not because they lacked information. It's not because they lacked capability, but because pressure changed how decisions were made. Today, on the third horizon, we want to explore that gap, the space between intelligence and wisdom. Because intelligence helps us solve problems, but wisdom helps us decide which problems are worth solving and how. We often assume that better technology will fix our decision making, faster data, smarter systems, more powerful tools. But history suggests something more uncomfortable. As our tools become more advanced, the consequences of poor judgment grows larger, not smaller. Lambit, with that in mind, can you think of any kind of situation where that would where apply with all the today's technology?
Absolutely. Think about it this way. You can buy an autonomous driving vehicle, which essentially drives you from A to B without crashing, which I would love to have. I'd love to have a vehicle like that if I trusted the technology. But it doesn't tell you if you're driving to the right place. And that's the thing. The difference between intelligence and wisdom is this. Intelligence means that you can do a task very well. Wisdom means that you're doing the right task. And I think one of the great challenges in our society is to tell the difference. And you said amen there. That's quite interesting to me because I actually think that there's a spiritual element in this. A lot of people think, oh, well, we can do away with God. We can do away with religion and spirituality because we've now got AI and we're really smart and we can make decisions about the future.
Well, that's actually the episode before this one talks about that spiritual element. Yeah.
In what way?
This is the way you're describing.
Well, and that's how I see it. I make no secret of my own faith. I believe that there is a creator to the universe. Otherwise, to quote my late father, who was a nuclear physicist, he said, to think all of this is an accident would be such a shame. And my father, Dr. Lembit Opik, I think was right. So returning to the question that you asked me, our mission is to work out why we are here. What is that wisdom for? And to use intelligence, whether it's artificial intelligence or our own intelligence, to inform our wisdom. And wisdom only comes from maturity. And I have to tell you, I'm fairly optimistic about the human race. I think we settle our disputes in a generally more agreeable way now than we did 10,000 or 50,000 years ago. But unfortunately, our intelligence also means we now have the capacity to destroy ourselves too. And that's the dilemma, John. The wisdom to use what our intelligence has created in a fair way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, technology does not remove human limits. It magnifies them. Under pressure, speed feels like competence. Decisiveness feels like leadership. Action feels safer than restraint. And yet, many of the most consequential failures in history did not come from hesitation. They came from confidence under pressure. This is not a new problem. Empires faced it, governments face it, and scientific institutions face it. And now, as humanity moves further into space, we face it again at the scale where mistakes cannot be quietly undone. And now a word for our sponsors.
This episode of The Third Horizon is brought to you by Coin Toss Coffee, a brand built on passion, family, and the bold leap into possibility. Every blend is handcrafted from Kevin's own recipes, including their best-selling cowboy roast. Bold, smooth, and unforgettable. And right now, listeners of The Third Horizon can enjoy 10% off their order at cointosscoffee.com using promo code Horizon10. That is cointosscoffee.com. Cointoss Coffee. Take a chance on a better cup.
In conversations with leaders, policymakers, and people working at the edge of long-term systems, one theme keeps resurfacing. The hardest decisions are not made when everything is clear. They are made when uncertainty is high, timelines are compressed, and consequences stretch far beyond the present moment. Lambit, you being somebody who has interacted with governing systems up close and personal for decades and seen firsthand how pressure affects decision making, with your as you know, because you served in the British Parliament, uh, based on what we just laid out, what pressure is high, or when pressure is high and uncertainty is real, what do you see decision makers most often underestimate?
They underestimate the consequences of making a bad decision. And I say that with some humility. Maybe I did that myself many, many years ago. But back to the wisdom point, I realize now that making a decision which looks good now, but will cause problems in the future, is like planting a field of weeds.
Yeah.
Now, the reality is, I can see politicians remorselessly, relentlessly making the mistake that you described. Why do they do it? To get re-elected, to be popular in the short term, to get through an election. And that's where it goes wrong. I can summarize my answer to your question as follows. Politicians think in the short term because that's all there is. They operate on 4 or 5 year electoral timelines. And so they work out what's going to sound good and do well for them at the next election. Not in every case. There are some just purely corrupt politicians who don't really care about any of that. And they just carry on making bad decisions to line their pockets. But most politicians, in my experience, John, they're doing the right thing as far as they see it. But it's about the short term. The greatest politicians think in the long term.
Yeah, the amazing thing is those short-term decisions can affect long-term situations.
They always do, John. They always do.
Yeah.
If you decide to support a war because you think it'll be popular at the next election, that war will have massive repercussions around the world. If you decide to support some woke ideology, and I'm not a woke person, I think that woke is terribly damaging to society. But if you decide to support it, then you end up with terrible consequences. Supporting the most abhorrent, in my view, sexual education to children who should not even be thinking about that. And so the short term always influences the long term. And it's actually only good fortune when bad short-term decisions don't damage the long term, but often they do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. But today we're going to explore why intelligence alone is not enough in those moments, why smart systems will still fail, why capable people still will choose poorly under pressure, and what wisdom actually looks like when certainty is unavailable. This is not about blame. It is not about prediction. It is about understanding the conditions that shape our choices and what those choices ask of us as individuals, institutions, and civilizations. When we talk about pressure distorting judgment, political systems offer some of the clearest examples. Not because politicians are less intelligent, but because political environments concentrate pressure in very specific ways. Time pressure, public pressure.
From Facebook,
Sorry.
Matthew P. George. Send a message to your new.
I thought I turned that off. Sorry, folks. I apologize for that. Public pressure, media pressure, and the pressure to appear decisive even when certainty is unavailable. One of the most studied examples of this comes from the Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1962, the United States discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. The situation unfolded rapidly. Military leaders presented strong, confident recommendations: airstrikes, invasion, immediate action. From an intelligence standpoint, those options made sense. They were decisive. They were forceful. They projected control. But what is often overlooked is how close the world came to catastrophe, not because of ignorance, but because of pressure. Pressure to act, pressure to show strength, pressure to resolve the situation quickly. What prevented escalation was not superior intelligence. It was restraint, deliberate slowing of decision-making, willingness to tolerate uncertainty, and the courage to resist the most confident voices in the room. President Kennedy chose to delay, to ask more questions, to create space for reflection. That decision was widely criticized at the time as weak. History remembers it differently. The lesson here is not about heroism. It's about judgment. Highly intelligent systems almost escalated into irreversible disaster because pressure narrowed the range of acceptable choices. Wisdom in this case looked like restraint under extreme stress. And that pattern is not rare. Political systems reward decisiveness. They punish hesitation. They mistake speed for competence. Over time, this trains institutions to move faster precisely when they should slow down. Lembit, you have worked inside political systems where pressure is constant. Electoral pressure, public scrutiny, crisis-driven timelines. From your experience, what does pressure do to judgment inside these institutions?
It perverts it. Pressure, on rare occasions, is good. Winston Churchill made some terrible decisions in his political upbringing, and as a result, made some great decisions under pressure during World War II. John F. Kennedy, a controversial character, and if you look at his biography, it's not portraying him as a saint that many people say he is. But you just said that the Cuban Missile Crisis was a case in point where pressure was not supreme. It didn't win. As it happens, his brother Robert gave John F. Kennedy some great advice. We won't go into it, but they actually ignored a second letter from the then Soviet Premier, Nikita Khrushchev, who I actually quite admire for many reasons. And they did the right thing. But there was the most enormous pressure because, as you say, we were very close to a nuclear war at the time. Pressure is something which plays on the weakest aspect of the human character. You want to give in to look good because it's easier, because you haven't got the energy to fight, all kinds of reasons. Domestic abuse between women against men and men against women is all about pressure, and the victim appeases the abuser. Put all that together, and you can see that in a world where pressure works, the decision makers are abused into making bad decisions at times. What stops that, John? Well, what stops it is when you have a higher order value system. And I'm going to make a theological comment now, and some of your viewers may not agree. But if there is no God, there's no point. If you're an atheist, then that pressure is all that matters, because the only recognition you're ever going to have is from other human beings. And I think that's one reason why the disintegration of what you might call more traditional value systems based on a God of some sort, that disintegration has been really dangerous. And it makes the human pressure to do the expedient thing, the comfortable thing, the popular thing, it increases that pressure massively. But if you have a higher order responsibility, if you think that we're here for the longer term, and if you think that we're actually serving something bigger than the 80 years or so that we might be here if we're lucky, then, well, do I need to lay this on with a trowel? I think the pressure affects those who think it's all about themselves.
Yes, and that is very true. Very true. What makes this difficult is that these systems are often filled with capable, intelligent people. But intelligence does not insulate against pressure. In fact, it can make pressure more dangerous, because smart people are very good at justifying fast decisions. This is why civilizations do not usually fail because leaders lack knowledge. They fail because decision environments reward certainty over caution, confidence over reflection, action over wisdom. Lambit, I want to stay here for a moment. You have seen how political systems operate from the inside, not just in the moment of crisis, but everyday decision making. From your experience, do institutions actually create space for wisdom under pressure, or do they quietly train people to reward speed, certainty, and confidence instead?
What a challenging question. For the sake of simplicity, let me put it this way. When you're very much in the public eye, when you're defending your tribe, political party, diaspora, your movement, then you're under enormous pressure to do what's popular, what gets you votes, what makes you popular, what gives me the good interviews. And at that time, I would say 80% of politicians in the Western world cave in. And they'll say what they think is going to get them popularity rather than what's right.
Get them for the next news cycle, right?
Yeah, and that's right. And you can see it all the time. You can see that with wars, with gender identity politics, with the environment. I believe that the climate crisis is basically a fake ideology, but people follow it because it's convenient. In my view, and maybe your viewers will disagree, my view, that's a classic example of where politicians follow something they don't understand, something which is basically scientific garbage, but they think in the short term they'll get a win. So there's that side. Now there's the other side of it. It's back to, and I don't really mean to keep coming back to the spiritual aspect of it, but the other side of it is if you do what's right, sometimes it's not right for you. If you're fighting in the front line and you get killed, that's not really good for you, is it? But it's good if you believe in the cause that you're fighting for the greater good. That's an extreme example. So the pressure to conform on the first part, if you're in it for personal ambition, yeah, it'll make a difference. It'll make you cynical. But on the second part, if you actually feel that you have a moral obligation to do the right thing, that makes you more powerful than any cynical politician who just does it for the sake of votes.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, as our tools become faster and our systems more complex, this problem does not shrink. It grows. And that brings us to a harder question. What happens when technology accelerates pressure rather than relieving it? Political systems show us how pressure distorts judgment. Technology intensifies that pressure. It does not create new human flaws. It amplifies existing ones. As technology advances, decision cycles shrink. Information arrives faster. Responses are expected sooner. Delays are interpreted as failure. This creates a dangerous illusion that faster decisions are better decisions. A clear example of this can be seen in modern financial markets. Automated trading systems now operate in milliseconds. They are built by highly intelligent people, driven by advanced algorithms designed for efficiency. Yet, time and again, these systems produce cascading failures, not because the technology malfunctioned, but because speed, disguised as good judgment, silently removed wisdom. When feedback loops accelerate beyond human comprehension, restraint disappears. Technology did not remove risk. It hid those risks until they multiplied beyond control. This is the core problem. Technology can increase capability. It cannot supply wisdom. It can accelerate action. It cannot slow judgment. And when systems move faster than human reflection, mistakes scale rapidly. Lambit, from your perspective, do modern institutions confuse technological sophistication with maturity?
Yes. And here's why. Many of the people now in positions of great influence are immature. By definition,
Yeah.
if you're immature, you don't understand what it means to be mature. You can't see what you can't understand. Mark Zuckerberg, who is a multi-billionaire in the tech industry, was apologizing for things that he'd put out on the internet. He said he'd been influenced and he'd been wrong. We don't need to go into the details of it. But Mark Zuckerberg is a billionaire. So clearly he fails on the test that you're suggesting there is. He's immature, he's wealthy.
Billionaire that would fall under that too.
Well, I'd be happy to be a billionaire, but I'd like to be a wise one.
Yes.
And you see other politicians and other business people who are very successful financially, but that did not make them mature. One of the things I noticed, John, when I was a member of Parliament in the United Kingdom is this. When you get into Parliament, you become more experienced as a politician, but you stop maturing emotionally. So you get locked into a certain level of maturity or immaturity, pretty much what you went into the system with. Now, I suspect it's because it's incredibly institutionalizing to be a member of parliament. But if I'm right, then that means that our politicians stop growing up. And that's the problem. So putting the questions you put to me earlier on about pressure together with the question of wisdom, and we are in a terribly dangerous situation where unwise people can learn to game politics. The public, which tends to trust authority, goes for the least worst option, and then we end up almost continuously on the verge of mutually assured destruction.
Absolutely. And, this becomes even more consequential when we look beyond Earth. As humanity moves further into space, those limits become unavoidable. Space does not allow rapid correction. There is no emergency exits, no quiet reversals. Orbital infrastructure, interplanetary missions, and long-term settlements operate on timescales far beyond election cycles or quarterly reports. In space, pressure punishes haste. Only restraint survives. This reveals something uncomfortable. The limits we are facing are not technological, they are human. And now another word for our sponsors.
This episode of The Third Horizon is also brought to you by FCA, Fine Consulting Agency. If you need high-level policy analysis, structured research, or strategic writing tailored for government, space governance, or nonprofit sectors, FCA delivers clarity, organization, and deep insight. Learn more at fcaonline.info, that is fcaonline.info.
Civilizations do not fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because under pressure, they confuse capability with judgment. Intelligence helps us act. Wisdom helps us decide when not to. Wisdom creates restraint when systems demand speed and incentives reward motion. It protects the future when the present seems louder. This is why long-term thinking is not just a planning exercise. It is a moral posture. It reflects how a society understands responsibility, not only to itself, but to those who inherit the consequences of its decisions. Technology will continue to advance. Political systems will continue to face pressure. Space will continue to test humanity in unforgiving environments. The only variable is how we choose to respond. The question is not whether we are intelligent enough to move forward. The question is whether we are wise enough to slow ourselves down when it matters the most. Lembit, I appreciate your insights today. Before we wrap up, is there anything you would like to leave with our audience? Perhaps some reflections on space governance and the responsibilities it brings.
I'm helping to try to create a global political system which can be exported into space. The world's first fully functional digital democracy, and John and I met through that. It proves that if you take away the tribalism, you can create a political system that actually works in the interests of all mankind. My second point is this. A lump of uranium can destroy a city if dropped upon it, or it can power a city if employed to do so. The same lump of uranium. And perhaps the lesson I'd like to leave your viewers with, a lesson that I've learned at great cost potentially, is this. The world isn't here to catch us out, to cause us to look bad, to encourage us to fail. The world gives us, the cosmos gives us the opportunity to do well. We live on a pale blue dot hanging in a great dark abyss. And so far, we haven't identified any other life in the universe. I personally think there must be some life in the universe, but this universe is sparsely populated. It's our responsibility to stop the tiny little fights we have with each other for territory on a little planet and look up and say, how do we do this together? I'm not going to evangelize, John, about my own spiritual beliefs, but for anybody who thinks that the universe is an accident, let me conclude with the words of my father. That would be such a shame.
Yes, and a big waste of space.
Yeah. Well put.
For those listening, this is not about choosing sides. It is about listening more carefully to history, to experience, and to the quiet patterns that keep resurfacing no matter how much the world changes. If you are someone who senses the world shifting, if you feel the tension between what is and what could be, if you believe humanity is meant for something more, then welcome. This is The Third Horizon. Thank you for watching this week's episode. Again, we want to thank our guest speaker, Lembit Opik, for his contributions. More conversations are coming, deeper, wider, and firmly focused on the future. If you like today's podcast, hit the like button, let us know in the comments, and subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, or Facebook channels, or whatever platform you are on. Do not forget to share this podcast with your friends and family. Until next week, keep looking to the horizon and beyond. Thank you, Lembit, again. I appreciate you here. Appreciate you
Always
being
my pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, and bless you.
Thank you. And that is the show.